For a week, the terrorist group Hamas that controls the Gaza Strip between Israel and Egypt has waged a war against Israeli civilians. Of course, since Hamas is a terrorist group, not a national army that follows the laws and customs of war, it hasn't done anything like invade Israel or send soldiers to the front line. It does what most terrorist cowards do. It lobs rockets over the border at Israel randomly. That's their purpose, to put civilians at risk, to cause terror. That's why they're called terrorists. But they're just as terrifying to Palestinian civilians because Hamas deliberately launches their terrorist rockets from civilian areas like houses, schools, and mosques. They do this for two reasons: in the hopes that Israel won't fire back at them, and in the greater hope that they do fire back. See, what you and I would call diabolical, deliberately putting civilians in the way of harm, using civilians as hostages, really whole apartment buildings, whole neighborhoods, Hamas calls a terrorist tactic. Here's a video clip of an Israeli fighter jet about to shoot back at a terrorist rocket launcher, but then calling off the attack when it spots innocent civilians in the way.
יש גם תנועה על הציר פה, איפה שאני מזיז עכשיו, וגם איפה ששני העיגולים יש אנשים נייחים.
פה כל האזור הזה מלא, מלא.
הרבה מאוד ילדים.
כרגע יש איזה 15 איש בטווח של 10-15 מטר מהמבנה התורה.
רואה, מקבלת עוברים למטרה אחרת.
So that's a win for the terrorists. It would be like someone robbing a bank and then strapping a bunch of children, hostages, on the outside of the getaway car so police don't shoot. The Israelis didn't shoot. But of course, Hamas knows this is a war mainly being played out in the media. So they're actually hoping Israel shoots back, on purpose or by accident, so they can blame the deaths of civilians on Israel. Here's a Hamas spin doctor. They actually have those, encouraging civilians to go along with this and be human shields. Look.
قبل ساعتين من الآن بثلاثة صواريخ مصيبة طائرات الاستطلاع الصهيوني، يعني خطوة جريئة قامت بها المواطنون بالتجمع أو بالتجمهر أو الاعتلاء أسطح سطح هذا المنزل، يعني لمنع طائرات الاحتلال
أن يتعرض الناس وأن يواجهوا الطيران العسكري الإسرائيلي بصدور عارية ليحموا بيوتهم. أعتقد أن هذه سياسة أثبتت نجاعتها، ونحن في الحركة ندعو شعبنا إلى اعتماد هذه السياسة.
He's calling on civilians to act as human shields. That's the nature of the terrorist enemy. It reminds me of when the late Golda Meir, Israel's first woman president, said, "Peace would only come when Arabs love their children more than they hate Israel." It's not just that Hamas hopes to incur civilian casualties from Israel. It's that since they operate from within a dense city of Gaza and are firing unguided rockets, they often hit their own people. In the past week, 38 of these Hamas terrorist rockets have actually hit Gaza itself. One knocked out the power to Gaza. They don't care. And of course, the media doesn't care either. Seriously, compare how Israel takes great care to pinpoint its attack on terrorists with the massive mow them all down, destroy the whole city approach by, say, Syria in its 3-year civil war with over 100,000 civilians dead. Israel actually drops leaflets in areas of Gaza it's about to attack, warning civilians to leave. Here's a copy of them in Arabic with an English translation saying, "Get out." They also do robocalls. They do an automatic phone call to everyone in an apartment block, in a block of the city, in Arabic, telling them they have a short time to get out before the attack comes on the Hamas activists in the building. Have you ever heard of a military force that gives very specific warnings of exactly where it's going to strike before they strike? Only Israel does. In fact, as Hamas continues to rain down rockets on Israel, even as Israel fights back against Hamas, Israel is still shipping aid to Gaza by truck on a daily basis. Yesterday alone, just one day, in the middle of the fighting, Israel sent 70 semi-trailer trucks of food and other supplies into Gaza for the Palestinians, as well as 120 tons of cooking gas and 376,000 liters of fuel in just one day. They're providing aid to Gaza civilians, even as terrorists in Gaza attack Israel, because it's not the civilians of Gaza who are attacking Israel. It's Hamas. Palestinian civilians are actually the chief victims of Hamas, but the world doesn't care. Just like they really don't care about Arabs killed in Syria. I mean, to the media, 100 dead Arabs isn't news. A single Arab killed by an Israeli because Hamas deliberately launches a rocket from a schoolyard. Now that's news. I mean, 971 rockets have been fired at Israel in the past week alone. The media doesn't care. Arabs kill Jews, the media yawns. Arabs kill Arabs, the media yawns. A Jew kills an Arab, even by accident, front page news, plus a UN resolution, of course. Oh, and don't bother telling me that this isn't about Jews, that it's not anti-Semitic, it's just anti-Israel and anti-Zionist. Because I've actually read the Hamas charter. The Canadian charter talks about things like equality before the law, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, things like that. That's the Canadian charter. The Hamas charter talks about killing Jews. 12 times it says that. The struggle against the Jews, fighting against the Jews, killing the Jews, finding Jews who are hiding and killing them 12 times. This is their manifesto. They are the new Nazis. I mean, take what was happening at this pro-Hamas riot against Jews yesterday. Hundreds of pro-Hamas rioters, but you'll notice this riot isn't even in Gaza or the Middle East. It's in Paris, France. Hundreds of Arab extremists rioting outside a synagogue in Paris, calling for death to the Jews, trapping Jews inside. The last time the world saw that, it was the Nazis doing it. That's just a notch rougher than what we saw in Mississauga, Ontario 2 weeks ago, when 200 rioters at Palestine House literally used Palestinian flags to beat Jews bloody, and an ambulance had to carry the Jews away. Police laid no charges. Did you think Jew hatred was obsolete or something, old-fashioned or something? Well, of course it is, but its modern practitioners are using high-tech methods. On Twitter, the hashtag Hitler was right was actually trending yesterday. They're not even pretending they're not the new Nazis. They are, and they love it. Most of the world is standing by. They don't care. The world either doesn't care or tacitly agrees. Or they're over a barrel of oil. Most of the money that funds these terrorists comes from oil money, from OPEC dictatorships, from Saudi Arabia, or in the case of Hamas, from Iran. So if you buy conflict oil from OPEC, you're funding these folks. Now, China, Japan, India, countries like that, they buy conflict oil by the billions of barrels. So does the United States. Barack Obama actually prefers Saudi conflict oil to Canadian ethical oil by stopping the Keystone XL pipeline. Even Eastern Canada imports Saudi terrorist oil. Do you really think the world is any different now, morally, than it was in the 1930s? Do you really think the UN would do anything more than the League of Nations did to stop the massacre of the Jews and the obliteration of Israel now as opposed to 70 years ago? No, it'll be worse. At least the League of Nations in the 30s pretended to be anti-Hitler. The United Nations is positively dominated by the 57 countries of the Saudi-led Organization of Islamic Cooperation. That is the largest bloc of countries at the UN. The UN would kill Israel itself if it could. Do you think Barack Obama will stand up for Israel? Well, he hasn't. In fact, Israel is his favorite country to push around. Obama loves Hamas, or at least the Muslim Brotherhood, of which Hamas is an affiliate. Obama has invited the Muslim Brotherhood to meet at the White House. He has supported the Muslim Brotherhood and the revolution in Egypt that almost turned that country into a Sharia state before the army kicked him out. Israel can only rely on itself. And its first-rate military that not only takes unprecedented pains to protect Palestinian civilians, but also its own civilians. The new Iron Dome anti-missile system shoots down a surprising proportion of these Hamas rockets. In other words, Israel won't walk like a lamb to the slaughter now, as 6 million Jews did in the Holocaust, not without a fight at least. And Canada, I'm proud to say, is part of the fight back. In the 1940s, Canada's Liberal government fought against Hitler bravely, but really didn't give a damn about Jewish refugees. The official policy of the Liberal government towards taking Jewish refugees fleeing the Holocaust in the 40s was none is too many. You can see that same liberal don't give a damnness today, that same soft anti-Semitism. Justin Trudeau has vigorously courted the Muslim and Arab vote in Canada, even admitting to visiting extremist Wahhabi mosques that are far outside the mainstream of Canadian values. You'll also remember Trudeau even opposed the Conservative government's decision to denounce honor killings as barbaric. Trudeau said that language was too mean. Well, Trudeau has spent far too much time and money recruiting extremists to his campaign to jeopardize that now. One of his advisors on the Middle East is the Saudi-born Omar al-Jabra, who used to run the anti-Semitic Canadian Arab Federation. There's no way Trudeau's going to jeopardize his vote. So here's the tepid statement Trudeau had another MP release on Gaza. Trudeau himself couldn't even bring himself to say this half-hearted statement. He had Marc Garneau do it 6 days ago, and then nothing since. Here, let me read the whole statement from the Liberals since it's so pitiful. Here's the Liberal statement. The Liberal Party of Canada is greatly concerned about the escalating violence in Israel and the Gaza Strip. We strongly urge all parties to, without delay, seek an immediate ceasefire. All possible steps must be taken to protect civilian life. The only path to peace is through negotiation. All sides must demonstrate restraint and a real commitment to peace if this violence is to be quelled. Seriously, not a word about terrorism, not a word about Hamas. Both sides should demonstrate restraint. So Israel had better rein itself in. So it's even-handed between a liberal democracy with the rule of law defending itself against terrorist rockets and the terrorist group launching those rockets. Is just a balance. Hey, that's the liberal view. Both sides are equally to blame. Sort of like a shootout between police and a criminal gang. Both sides had better cool it. No moral difference between the two. Is this none is too many all over again? Because Justin Trudeau wants the extremist vote in Canada? Let me close on the closest thing I can to a positive note today. A comment not from the President of France, beset by anti-Semitic pogroms, not from the President of the United States, too busy golfing and shooting pool to care, but from the leader of the free world, Canada's Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. Let me quote. "The indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza on Israel are terrorist acts for which there is no justification. It is evident that Hamas is deliberately using human shields to further terror in the region. Failure by the international community to condemn these reprehensible actions would encourage these terrorists to continue their appalling actions. Canada calls on its allies and partners to recognize that these terrorist acts are unacceptable and that solidarity with Israel is the best way of stopping the conflict. Canada is unequivocally behind Israel. We support its right to defend itself by itself against these terror attacks and urge Hamas to immediately cease their indiscriminate attacks on innocent Israeli civilians. Canada reiterates its call for the Palestinian government to disarm Hamas and other Palestinian groups operating in Gaza, including the Iranian proxy, Palestinian Islamic Jihad." That's an amazing statement. These are dark days, but Israel is a light unto the nations. And you know what? I think Canada is too.